Tyler, federal, provincial, territorial governments all got together, the agriculture ministers, and came up with a 5-year deal. What does it mean for consumers and producers?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The way agriculture policy works in Canada, provincial governments and federal governments have to work together. The way that they do that now is through 5-year agreements, and it isn't always easy to get to those agreements. We've got different governments across the country that have different priorities, but they did some tough negotiating and got together and agreed to the new Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership. And really, it should be good news for Canadian agriculture. The fact that government's got a deal, that in itself is great news. The deal means that governments are going to invest more. They're going to help invest more in practices that are going to make farms more sustainable. They're going to invest more in practices that are going to make farms more profitable. They've made some improvements to help improve the tools that farmers have to manage risks. And so overall, I think people are generally pretty satisfied with the progress that government's made and what this is going to mean to help support and grow Canadian agriculture over the next 5 years.
And for consumers, what should they take away from the fact that their governments are actively looking at upping food production through a number of different ways?
Yeah, governments were pretty clear when they met that when they look at whether it's the sustainability or these other policies that they're putting in place, food production, food security is really important to them. They want to make sure that Canada is doing all that it can to produce enough food to feed consumers here in Canada and around the world. So I think consumers really should know that the governments are supporting agriculture. They're trying to help the sector that already is sustainable become even more sustainable, and that's going to make a better, stronger, more sustainable, more resilient food system for Canadian consumers.
August has begun, and so has the harvest in many parts of this country. What's coming off fields right now?
That's right. So this is just the early starts of harvest 2022. But in Eastern Canada in particular, you're seeing winter wheat that was planted last fall start to be harvested. We're just in the early days, and again, I think farmers have. This has been a challenging year. We've seen a lot of tough weather. We've seen commodity and input prices all over the place. But harvest is usually something that gets farmers pretty optimistic and gets pretty excited. So you'll see it really start to pick up pace as we get through to August, and then in September it will be in full swing across the country.
And given the weather that we've had, and the factors that many of which are beyond producer control, what are you seeing or what are you predicting in terms of yield this year? What can consumers expect in terms of pricing?
Yeah, on yield, I think people are pretty compared to last year, which was a really bad year, it was a really hard year due to drought across the prairies. I think everybody's pretty optimistic that we'll at least be back to normal, and maybe some parts of the country, some commodities, a little bit above. Again, that's in given all of the other challenges that exist in the world, that's probably not as good as it could be, but I think it's an important step and the sign that again in the face of even some weather challenges this year, farmers have been able to pull off a crop and do it in a way that's again going to boost production up 40% from the year before.
And then the challenge becomes getting it to market, right? So you're seeing transporters, rail companies, and others sort of deliver their plans to do that. What are you reading from those tea leaves?
Yeah, it's again, this is always the challenge that we've got. We've got grain that gets harvested that all comes off in a period of a couple of months that really needs to move as quickly as possible to markets. On a normal year, that product needs to move, but this year in particular, when we've seen this tightening grain supply coming out of Ukraine and Russia, there's going to be pressure all around the world to get grain off of Canadian farms and into export positions all around the world. And so we've seen the Canadian grain farmers and grain shippers a couple of weeks ago launch their Canada's Ready campaign, calling on on the railways, governments, and others to really commit to making sure that we can move grain as much as possible, so that Canada can really be ready to get get grain to where it needs to be. We've seen the railways respond this week with their rail plans that set out how much grain they expect to move. It's interesting to see how it plays out. The railways are saying, we're going to do all that we can, but there's a lot of things that are standing in the way. They're already saying there's probably going to be weeks this fall when they can't move as much grain as what needs to be moved. And so hopefully, all of the potential extreme weather and other things that could stand in the railway's way doesn't come to be. Hopefully we have a good fall with and winter with smooth sailing, so we can so the railways can move as much grain as they can, because that grain is needed, and it's needed all around the world as quickly as it can get there.